This all happened 6 years ago, when I was visiting my great-grandmother in the Free State. I've always been scared of the dark or sleeping alone, so I asked if I could sleep with my aunt, and she didn't have a problem. I'm 30 years old, by the way. The first night wasn't so bad, as I had the comfort that I wasn't alone in bed. I heard dragging footsteps in the kitchen and the door opening and closing, but was too afraid to wake up and investigate or wake my aunt up for something that's not there. I just laid there on the bed, listening to this thing in person, dragging feet around in the kitchen and opening and closing the doors between the dining room and kitchen. I ultimately fell asleep. The next morning, I asked my aunt if she'd heard anything, and she said no. The second night was what scared me the most. As we laid there sleeping, I just suddenly turned, and my eyes opened wide, and there, inside the wardrobe, I could see, since the door was half open, was a dark male figure with red eyes peeping through. Our eyes just met, and I couldn't scream or move. I just stared right back at those red eyes, and it spoke in Soto, South African language. It said, "I'm not here to scare you, but to scare that one," meeting my aunt, and I can't remember what happened after or how I fell back to sleep. I told my aunt about it, and we had to sleep with the light on for the rest of my stay. I still can't get the black figure with red eyes hiding in the wardrobe out of my head. The first strange experience I had was during my sister's 10th or 11th birthday party. At the time, my family lived in a house in a blue-collar town in New Jersey. The house was set up where the front door was, up a flight of stairs. Once inside, there was a landing that led to another flight of stairs upstairs and another leading to the lower level. Downstairs was a long hallway with a doorway leading to the garage. At the foot of the stairs, which formed one end of a long hallway, there was a closet under the stairs. There was a laundry room at the end of the hallway, and finally large living room. My sister had invited all of her friends, and everyone was having a good time. After eating cake, the grown-ups went upstairs for coffee, and the kids stayed downstairs to play on their own. At a certain point, we all decided to scare each other by telling ghost stories in front of the laundry room. My sister and I had always thought of it as the creepiest spot in the house, and it proved to be the perfect spot to tell ghost stories. When you opened the laundry room door, you stared down a long dark room with a shaded window at the end. The doorway to the laundry room was a small recess at the end of the hallway. The house quieted down as we started talking about scary things. After a few of those stories, everyone started to get into the spirit. My sister and I were sitting at the end of the hall, looking down its length. From our vantage point, we could see the wall along which the door leading to the garage was. We were midway into someone's ghost story when my sister suddenly noticed that the door leading to the garage had suddenly popped open just a bit. She remembered that the door was definitely locked. We walked over and closed the door and made sure to lock it again. By then, all of us were terrified and thoroughly petrified in our own little recess. As little kids, not one of us wanted to move out of our spot or make a noise. Just then, someone rang the doorbell, which made everyone jump 3 feet, but was enough to kill the moment. Everyone started laughing. Our house was new when we bought it, and nothing strange had ever happened to anyone in my family there. Now that we're older, my sister and I still bring up this incident with my sister, and we both have a good laugh. She still swears that she locked the door. Growing up, I spent a lot of time reading true ghost stories and still do. When we were little, my sister and I would borrow the ghost books from the library. The best were the ones with real pictures. I remember reading one of those ghost books when I was in middle school. It was right during the time when midterms or finals were coming up, and I had a pile of school books on my desk. A ghost book was tucked away there somewhere, and for a break, I'd pull out the ghost book. At the time, I was part of the school basketball team and proudly received my practice jersey, which I still have, that I kept hung on a hook at the back of my bedroom door. That night, I was studying for finals with the bedroom door closed. My desk faced the wall, and the door was 4 feet to the right. I had my Walkman on, do you remember those things? And started getting into the rhythm of doing my English homework to the tunes of rap. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I was distracted by some movement. I looked up to see my jersey swinging back and forth on the hook. It looked just as if someone had tipped the hanger to one side with a finger, causing it to swing. Right away, I checked to see if the door was locked. Maybe my father had opened the door after I didn't hear him knocking. I didn't want to be bothered while studying, so it was logical that I would have locked it. When I checked, the door was definitely locked, and there was no noise behind the door. All the while, the jersey continued swaying back and forth, eventually stopping after losing speed. Next, I checked to see if the window was open, but it was November, and the windows were all closed to keep out the cold. Right before I noticed the jersey swinging, I'd just put down a very large, hardcover dictionary onto the desk. The dictionary was about 10 inches long and 3.5 inches thick. I thought maybe it made a slight wind as I put it down, but no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't cause the jersey to move from 4 feet away. I didn't feel scared and just continued studying with the Walkman on. Nothing like this has ever happened again, but I can't explain what caused that jersey to swing. One of the most bizarre experiences I've ever personally had was with my family while staying at a hotel in Atlantic City, New Jersey. It happened around 1997, and I was lucky to have most of my family there to experience it with me. Atlantic City is an interesting location for strange experiences. The casinos draw many from the New York area and beyond, but along with this brings the good and bad of social ills that come along with games of chance. The summer of 1997 was a typical one. Like we did many summers before, my family drove down the shore to spend a few days enjoying the beach and casinos at Atlantic City. As usual, my father arranged the trip and found a new hotel with a very reasonable price. The name of the hotel was called the Flagship and is still located at the northern end of the boardwalk, far from the other casinos. After a long, cold winter, my family was anxious to see the ocean and asked the front desk for an oceanfront view. We were told that the only room available wasn't facing the ocean, but with 2 queen-size beds, the room was very comfortable and that we could see the ocean from the side of the balcony. It was the perfect size for my parents, my sister and I, and we agreed, and the man at the front desk gave us 2 door cards. Our room was on the 10th floor. Looking back, none of us recalled running into many guests in the hotel at all. However, we thought that since the hotel was new, it was just beginning to attract customers. Once we found our room, we used the room card to open the door and went inside. Right away, things went wrong. The room was very dark. The curtains for the sliding door to the balcony were pulled, and extremely cold. It was a typical hotel room, except for a small kitchen area right in front of 2 queen-size beds. At the foot of the second bed was a sofa bed. Then beyond the second bed, there was a sliding glass door leading to a small balcony. Although we were facing the interior of Atlantic City, just as the front desk mentioned, we could see the ocean on one side of the balcony. Very soon, we found out why the room was so chilly. The air conditioner, which was located on the wall above the sofa bed, was turned on full blast and wouldn't turn off. As I mentioned this to my father, I saw my mother fidgeting with the front door's electronic lock. Like she often said, and did, she checked to see if the door was locked when closed from the outside. It wasn't. Inside the door, there was a sticker that explicitly stated that the door was always locked on the outside. Not so. We also realized that the stove in the small kitchen wasn't working. Then we saw that there was a small leak coming from the mini fridge as well. My father called downstairs, and soon a repairman came up and fixed the AC, the stove, the refrigerator leak, and even the front door. He mentioned that the lock should always be locked from the outside and seemed puzzled by the device. We gave the man a big tip and then quickly made our way over to the casinos. When we arrived back to our room, well after dinner, we immediately felt how cold it was in the room and turned off the AC. After washing up, we watched some television before turning in. I remember one of the programs was about ghosts, and we watched that one for a while, not realizing what was to come. My mother and sister were the first to go to bed and turned off the lights. They slept in different beds, with my mother in the bed closer to the kitchen area and my sister in the one near the balcony. I stayed up reading on the kitchen table with the dim light on. I had some trouble falling asleep that night since the sofa bed mattress was new and was still covered in plastic. I must have felt lazy because I left it on and suffered because it was very hot and not very conducive to a good night's rest. At breakfast the next morning, my sister told us about something strange that happened during the night. All night long, she said she felt someone brushing past her bed as if trying to walk to the balcony door. At the foot of her bed, there was about a foot of space between her bed and the end of my sofa bed. She said it felt exactly like someone was squeezing through the tight space and rubbing against her bed. At first, she thought it was me trying to get outside the balcony. Then when she looked up, she saw my father and I still sitting at the kitchen table reading. At the time, none of us really believed her, and we went out again for a day of walking on the boardwalk and then gambling at night. That night, I stayed up later than everyone else. I talked to my sister about what she experienced the night before. I also told her to let me know if she felt it again. As soon as she got in bed, I sat down by the kitchen table to read, glancing over towards her bed every once in a while to see if anything happened. After a while, I gave up and continued reading before getting up to wash up in the bathroom. When I came out of the bathroom, my sister was sitting up in bed. She said that she again thought I had squeezed past the bed to go to the balcony, but then she opened her eyes and saw me come out of the bathroom at the other end of the room. I was positioned on the sofa bed so that my head was right next to the little space at the end of my sister's bed. If someone walked past, I would have surely felt something, but that night I didn't notice anything at all. As usual, it took a little bit of time for me to sleep. I listened intently and tried to feel any wind or changes in the room, but eventually gave up and slept. I had by then taken off the troublesome plastic cover and finally had a good night's rest. The next day, my father woke me up early to rent bikes for an early morning boardwalk ride. Then he went to my sister and woke her up as well. As soon as he did this, my mother, who planned to sleep in, suddenly sat up in bed and turned on the lights in the TV. We asked her why she didn't want to sleep, since it was still only about 5:30 a.m. She told us that she wasn't very tired and that she felt like waking up, which is unusual since she usually likes to sleep past 11. We all thought this was pretty odd. My mother loves to sleep late. She kept giving us vague reasons about why she wouldn't go back to sleep, and even turned on the television. Later on, she told us the reason why. At breakfast, my mother told us about the strange incident that happened that night. She had woken up in the middle of the night. It was late, and she could hear all of us either snoring or breathing the natural rhythms of a very good night's rest. She was sleeping on the right-hand side of the first bed and was lying on her side facing inwards, but gradually she realized that she felt the sensation of someone's back lying against her own. At first, she was convinced that it was my sister, but she was pretty alarmed to realize that my sister was in the other bed, 4 feet away. Slowly, without opening her eyes, she moved closer to my father. The feeling was very real, but very slowly, the other person's back gradually went away. My mother said that in the morning, she hadn't expected my sister to go riding bikes with us, leaving her all alone in the room. After we left, she tried her best to stay awake. She turned on all the lights and turned on the television, but eventually she fell asleep anyway. As my mother told us this story, my sister chimed in saying that the person walked past her bed all of last night as well. This time though, she also felt her sheets being gently pulled away to the corner of the bed towards the balcony. For some reason, whenever she turned to face the balcony, it would stop. When she turned back around, she would feel the bed bulge a little, as if a person were rubbing past it. Also, she felt energy waves from the foot of her bed. After we came back to the room from breakfast, all of us were not so sure about our room anymore. Despite this, we still had a day of vacation and fun to look forward to. After we got what we needed, my father went downstairs early to get some brochures. Then my sister and I walked to the elevator while my mother got some last-minute things. We were both standing there by the elevator doors when we heard my mother anxiously calling us back to the room. When we got there, she looked a little shaken and said that the front door wouldn't lock from the outside again. She said that all the while, as she was rifling through her suitcase looking for something, she had a bad feeling and couldn't wait to get out of the room. Once safely outside, as an afterthought, she turned the handle to see if the door was locked from the outside. Once again, it wasn't locked. This time, we went downstairs instead of calling for a repairman. The front desk seemed puzzled about the lock. They said that the lock should always be locked from the outside. They were at a loss as how to fix it, and finally recommended that we get another room. Everyone felt very relieved, and we quickly gathered our things to get out of the room immediately. We got another room upstairs, and this time, our new room was perfect in every way. Not surprisingly, the rest of our trip was pretty relaxed, but we sometimes joked about what would happen to us if we stayed another night in that room. All of us agreed that there was something in that room that wanted to be left alone. It didn't want to scare us, but instead just gently showed us that we had to go. For some reason, my mother and sister feel that it was a child or a little boy. If this is true, perhaps something happened to the boy in the room. Everything seems to point to the balcony where things seem to emanate from. Perhaps the boy fell off the balcony, or maybe someone died in the room. Maybe the spirit felt an affinity to the woman, as opposed to my father and I, who didn't experience anything. The flagship is now a luxury timeshare condo. I'm not sure if it's still partly a hotel. While we were there, the hotel operators aggressively tried to sell us a timeshare, but of course, we turned them down every time. I wonder who bought the timeshare for that room on the 10th floor, and if anything similar happened to them. I have a brother who works in Hong Kong. Many of his clients are from this area in China. One of his clients was a Hong Kong businessman in his 40s. This client often went on frequent business trips to Shanghai and Beijing for his company. My brother was very familiar with this man, as were many other of the people working in my brother's office. My brother worked closely on him on several large projects, and they often made small talks during breaks. On one occasion, he told my brother that on one of his visits to Shanghai, he was staying in a hotel and had just returned to his room at night after a long day's work. He washed up, turned down the lights, and then got into bed. He had drifted off into an exhausted sleep when he was violently awakened in the dead of night. In the pitch darkness, he felt the ice-cold hands of a woman clasped around his neck, strangling him as he tried desperately to break free. After a few seconds, the hands finally let go, and the man jumped up and turned the lights on. As he scanned the room, he found himself absolutely alone. The room looked just as it had before he got into bed. Upon his return to Hong Kong, He was profoundly shaken by the incident and consulted with a very good fortune teller that his family knew well. The fortune teller told him that there was a woman following him around. He didn't know the reason, but that was the case. My brother's client was a businessman, and in spite of what had happened to him, scoffed at the idea of some mysterious ghost lady following him around. My brother and his client had a good laugh about this during their break. Still, my brother warned him to be careful and to make sure he was a gentleman to the lady ghost. A few months had passed before my brother heard what had happened to his client. Many of my brother's colleagues were talking about it in my brother's office when the topic came up. They had heard that the client had died in a hotel room in Shanghai. The cleaning lady had discovered his body in the room, alone and lying in bed. We sometimes wonder what really happened to this client. We wonder if he just died of natural causes, or if those cold hands returned during the night. If so, who was she? I don't know, but it's a strange story. Hey guys, you've reached the end of Phantom of Darkness's Haunted Ghost Stories. I'm doing this a little bit more often because I feel like it's important, so maybe I'll make it part of every video at the end. Anyway, I know you guys hate hearing this, but remember to like the video and share it around so I can remain relevant. Can't talk, and I'm not going to edit that out, so I'll let you guys enjoy the rest of the night or day, whichever you want. Love you guys, and I'll talk to you maybe later, or forever. Okay, love you guys. Stay here. Don't unsubscribe. Bye.